U.S. Navy said in a statement that guided missile destroyer USS Hinamon had conducted a freedom of navigation operation without requesting permission from Beijing. China sent military vessels and aircraft in an attempt to expel a U.S. warship asserting international freedom of navigation rights in the Paracel Islands of the disputed South China Sea. The freedom of navigation operation challenged the restrictions on innocent passage imposed by China, Taiwan, and Vietnam, and also contested China's claim to straight baselines enclosing the Paracel Islands, said Commander Rhian Momsen, a spokeswoman for the U.S. Navy's 7th Fleet. Under international law, ships of all states, including their warships, enjoy the right of innocent passage through territorial seas. Momsen said that the sailing had also challenged China's 1996 declaration of straight baselines encompassing the Paracel Islands. Beijing has effectively drawn a line around the entire Paracels archipelago, which it calls the Xisha Islands, in a bid to claim the entire territory, despite rival claims. Momsen noted that international law does not permit continental states like China to establish baselines around entire island groups. Using these baselines, China, she said, has attempted to claim more internal waters, territorial sea, exclusive economic zone, and continental shelf than it is entitled under international law. China's defense ministry said in a statement that it had warned the U.S. warship and demanded that it leave the area for trespassing into China's territorial waters. Without permission of the Chinese government, China has indisputable sovereignty over the Paracels and their adjacent waters, according to Senior Colonel Li Huimin, a spokesperson for the People's Liberation Army's Southern Theater Command. The U.S. for a long time has threatened China's sovereignty in the South China Sea under the name of freedom of navigation, showing its lack of sincerity in maintaining international peace and regional security stability, Li said. The USS Hinamon conducted a similar operation last month, sailing within 12 nautical miles of the contested Fiery Cross and Mischief Reefs, 2 Chinese-occupied islands in the South China Sea. That sailing came just days after the Pentagon issued an unusually strong statement that accused Beijing of employing bullying tactics in the waterway, citing what it said was coercive interference in oil and gas activities in waters claimed by Vietnam. Beijing claims much of the South China Sea, though the Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia, Taiwan and Brunei have overlapping claims in the waters, where the Chinese, US, Japanese and some Southeast Asian navies routinely operate. Neither Japan nor the US have claims in the waters, but both allies have routinely stated their commitment to a free and open Indo-Pacific. US forces routinely conduct freedom of navigation assertions throughout the world, including in the South China Sea, as a routine part of daily operations, Momsen said. The Freedom of Navigation program's missions are conducted peacefully and without bias for or against any particular country, she added. Washington has lambasted Beijing for its moves in the waterway, including the construction of man-made islands, such as those in the Paracel chain and further south in the Spratlys, some of which are home to military-grade airfields and advanced weaponry. The US fears the outposts could be used to restrict free movement in the waterway, which includes vital sea lanes through which about $3 trillion in global trade passes each year. The US military regularly conducts freedom of navigation operations in the area. Beijing says it has deployed the advanced weaponry to the islets for defensive purposes, but some experts say this is part of a concerted bid to cement de facto control of the waters. In a defense white paper released for the first time in years in July, China highlighted a new emphasis on combat readiness and military training in real combat conditions and China's new warfighting capabilities in the Western Pacific and South China Sea. Beijing, the white paper said, has organized naval parades in the South China Sea and conducted a series of live force-on-force exercises, while its Air Force has conducted combat patrols in the South China Sea and security patrols in the East China Sea, and operated in the West Pacific. China condemned a U.S. naval patrol near disputed reefs in the South China Sea and called on Washington to stop infringing upon its sovereignty. It was the first time an American warship had challenged 2 Chinese military outposts at once in a freedom of navigation operation. Li Huimin accused the United States of acting as a hegemon in ignorance of the international laws and rules and urged Washington to stop its provocative actions to avoid an unpredictable incident. The U.S. Navy has sent ships into waters around the Chinese-controlled islands and reefs almost on a monthly basis since the end of last year to challenge excessive maritime claims. Chinese and U.S. warships regularly have encounters in the South China Sea, where Beijing also has territorial disputes with its neighbors. It also follows China's rejection of a request by a U.S. naval vessel to make a port call at Qingdao in eastern Shandong province. Earlier in the month, Beijing also rejected a port call request for 2 U.S. warships to visit Hong Kong. Meanwhile, the European Union has called on all parties in the South China Sea to exercise self-restraint. Unilateral actions during the past weeks in the South China Sea have resulted in mounting tensions and a deterioration of the maritime security environment, which represents a serious threat to the peaceful economic development of the region, the bloc said. The EU is committed to the legal order for the seas and oceans based upon international law, maritime security and cooperation, as well as the freedom of navigation and overflight, in the interest of all states.